Hi, welcome back to the final of the British Championship. After 9 grueling Swiss rounds, we've had a playoff, and now we're down to 2 players, 2 of the top contenders, Gawain Jones and Luke McShane, and they've started their mini match of 2 games. They're playing at a rhythm of 10 minutes with 5 seconds of increment, and if the match is still a tie after these 2 games, then we'll go to the Armageddon. But let's not go too far with our ideas, and we're going straight to the game. So Jones has got white in the first game, and we're going to pick up the game here after the move Queen F3. So this is a topical variation of the Scotch, and it's theoretical. And normally the queens come off the board. The ending is considered slightly better for white, but always in a frame of drawing options. So after knight takes c6, this is the tricky move, Queen f6, creating a threat of mate here, and also with the idea of recovering the knight with the queen without doubling any pawns. So Queen f3 is a good move, and now normally game progresses with Queen takes f3, G takes f3, and now D takes c6, which is the ending I was mentioning. And now normally bishop to e3 is the main move. This has been played many times, and I think the consensus is slightly favourable for white, but nothing spectacular. However, after Queen f3, McShane has played Queen e7, and this is a new move for me. I've never seen this move in practice, but of course, if McShane plays it in the main game of the tournament, it must be theoretical. I have to say that there's another move here, which is Queen d2. This was the move that Kasparov used to play when he was facing this variation. And the idea is after d takes c6, bishop d3, bishop e6, and try to play with castle, knight c3, rook d8. But the queen is sometimes in an uncomfortable position here. Kasparov used to play afterwards Queen f4, and as you can see, he's trying to get a position without the queens on the board and with the pawn majority on the king side. Okay, so we go back to the game position. After Queen e7, white has just played bishop d3, and black has played knight f6. So it seems that McShane is content to play with the queens on the board and doesn't really worry much about white getting his kingside majority. Now, for you all to understand how this type of position works, we can do a comparison with the Ruy Lopez. So let's quickly do this comparison of the Ruy Lopez in the exchange variation. So we get this type of position where after a few moves, for instance this position, this would be a topical position, where white has a kingside pawn majority, black does have a double pawn, which normally can't be undoubled, but black does have a good middle game because he has the bishop pair and white doesn't have the bishop pair. So this is why, although every now and then we see the exchange Ruy Lopez, it's not one of the main lines for white because black's bishop pair more than compensates the pawn majority of white on the king side. Now if we go back to the game, we can see that the same structure can be seen on the queen side, and also white does have the pawn majority. The key difference is that although black does have the bishop pair, white also has the bishop pair. So normally this is considered to be slightly better, slightly preferable for white, because I have a kingside pawn majority, which is not much, but it's something, and black doesn't have the bishop pair to compensate. Of course, it's never that simple, and black does have active piece play for his weakness, his structural pawn, double pawn weakness. And Luke has actually just played knight g4, white has swapped on c5, and now will presumably castle and get his king into safety. He could entertain long castling, but then he'd have to consider what would happen after queen takes f2. Sorry, knight is f2. Of course, there is a king f1 here, trying to hit the pawn on f7, but of course black could take with the queen, and then he'd lose material. So that will obviously not happen. And instead of that, the move that Jones has played is Queen g3, keeping the defense on the pawn, pressuring the c7 square, and as we've seen in comparison with Ruy Lopez, white will always have slightly favorable endgames. For instance, if black would just play queen e5 here, well, I suspect that queen takes queen, knight takes queen, and now just bishop e2. Then we follow up with pawn to f4, king f2, king a3, and white would have the better ending. Definitely not one, but I'm sure that Jones would be happy to grind this endgame against Luc Moshang. But for the moment, Luc is considering how to answer to the attack on the pawn on c7. He's played bishop e6, which is not really a pawn sacrifice, because if white does capture here, he'd be making a huge mistake, because the queen could come into f2, and white would be practically lost here. No? Knight e3 would follow. So it's not really a pawn sacrifice. And so it might be said that black is trying to do long castle, get his king into safety on the queen side, and communicate his rooks. So what can white do here? Obviously king castle. I think that would be a very safe move. He still can't castle on the queen side. We saw that before. He could push back the knight. This would be, I think, reasonable. And I'm thinking that probably black would go to e5 here and exchange off another piece on e2. So this could be the idea. So let's see what's been played. f4, a very aggressive move. He's actually threatening f5, and the knight would be hanging on g4. But he is allowing the knight or the queen to come into e3. So there's going to be some tactics here. Let's consider this option. Queen e3 check, queen takes e3, knight to e3. Okay, so c2 is protected, g2 is not protected, so I'm thinking king f2 could be an idea here. We hit the knight, it has to go back. Now maybe even king f3, threatening f5. Yeah, this looks very good for white. So queen e3 would be a bad move. So Luc hasn't taken much time to long castle, but now we have to be careful with the tactics here. Obviously f5 would leave the knight en prise, so we'd have to consider what is black's idea in this position. It might be to play queen e3, queen takes, knight takes, but then he's losing the bishop. This can't be the idea. So what are we missing in this position? What's black going to do against f5? I don't really see a move. Bishop c4? No, I just can't believe that Luc is just hanging a piece here. It's just unbelievable. Maybe the idea is to sacrifice here and come in with the other rook. This does look dangerous. I'm not entirely sure if this is correct or not, but Jones has gone for f5. He hasn't seen anything. He's gone for f5. So, okay, this could be the move, but is this completely clear? Okay, king d2. This check is controlled. Knight f2 can be answered by rook e1. There seems to be playing queen e3, but I don't think this is possible. No, he can't play queen e3. I'm not sure if queen e3 has been played. No, it hasn't been played yet. The last move is f5. So something is captured on f5, so it must be bishop takes f5, e takes f5. But this may be... I just don't want to say. As you all know, I'm commentating organically, without according to the computer, which is the way I like to do it, because it's fresh analysis of what I think of the moment. So I really can't say. It would be easy for me to check the computer to see if this is correct or not, but it seems to me that there shouldn't be enough attack. But then again, I don't think Luke would just blunder a piece that way, So maybe it's something he's calculated previously. So he's gone knight e3 now. And of course, this prevents white from castling queenside. And if he goes kingside, then at least knight takes f2 will hit the rook. So this is a way of stranding the white king in the center and trying to follow up with rook h e8. But it just seems to me there's not enough compensation here. For example, I could probably play queen f2. Sorry, was I saying short castle? That's impossible, obviously, because I can't cross the knight on f1. So sorry about that misstep. No, but queen f2 is possible. I think so. Defending the g2 pawn, defending the c2 pawn. And if black goes rook h e8, which is the move that I'd probably play here, I'm trying to think if I can block with knight to e4. Of course, this is all very tricky, but I think it's okay. Because if rook takes, bishop takes, I don't see a way in. There is a check on b4, so this could be the idea. Okay, well, things have changed because instead of queen f2, the simple king d2 is the move that Gawain decided to play. And it seems very sensible because, okay, we're attacking the knight. If the rook comes here, we can also bring our rook in. A check on c4 would just fall back to c1. And if he takes the pawn on f5, we'll just pin with the queen. We're not actually threatening this move because our bishop is pinned. But for instance, if king goes to b8, we take advantage to bring our rook into play. And our next move is king c1. Is this an extra piece for a pawn? Yeah, unless Luke proves me wrong, I think this is a blunder. I think Luke has missed that f5 was leaving the knight hanging on g4. What else can he do? Knight c4, king c1. No problem at all. Rook h e8. That would be a normal move for the attack. And now I think I'd get this rook out. So I can fall back to c1. I'm just struggling to find compensation here. Knight c4, king c1. Now what to do? What to do, my friend? My friends on the stream. This is just lost. Okay, he has two pawns for the piece, but one of them is a double pawn, so it's more or less half a pawn. And there are many pieces on the board. So this is basically a resignable position. Okay, he has to do something else. Let's go back. He's played knight c4, apparently. At least this forces the king to come here and the rooks aren't communicated. Probably it's the best move. He's played king c1. And what's happened here? Let me check what's happened here. King c1. Knight takes. King takes. Queen b4, okay. King c1. Queen takes c3. Rook b1. Okay, so here's a clear piece down. He's got two pawns, but I'm thinking this is not enough compensation. If we could get a new pawn, that would be good. And for instance, queen a3, rook d2, this pawn would be protected. And careful, because white is threatening f6, followed by bishop f5 check, catching the queen on a3. So what to do here for Luke? This is a big upset for Luke because if he doesn't recover in this game, he's going to have white on the next game, but a draw will allow Gawain to progress to the title. So it's very difficult for him here. What can he play? At the moment, rook b3 is not a threat because of queen a1, but There are several interesting ideas for white here. So he could bring his rook over to d1 to parry the threat of rook takes d3, and that will allow him to play moves such as queen e4, c4, or queen g5, d2, or even f6 at some point. Yeah, I'm struggling to find a good move here. I'd actually say he's lost. It pains me to say it, but I think he's just lost here. I'm going to check the times. Times are 1 against 5. Okay, he might be able to play c5. So in c4, this could be a good try. So probably rook d1, and c4 we get bishop e4. What's this like? Okay, this may be possible because rook takes, I can check. And now I have this check here, and maybe this check here, which picks up the bishop. So it's not entirely clear that rook d1 will be the best move. I probably need another move here against c5. But black has chosen another approach. He's played rook d4. So it looks like he's trying to get the other rook in and push this pawn forward. Okay, queen e1 looks good, but it would fail to rook takes bishop. So, wow, rook takes b7. Look at that. Rook takes b7. Wow, lovely, lovely, lovely jubbly. You see why, no? If he takes, then we get bishop a6 check, and we discover the queen to capture the queen on c3. Lovely jubbly. But is it a mistake? What can black do in the meantime? If he checks here, we block. If he checks here, we block. What if he takes here? Then we mate him on c7. Nice. So queen a1 has been the move that Luke has played, and I'm thinking that rook b1 is the correct move here, but maybe he could go... Can he go king d2? It's wonderful, because if he captures here, if he captures the rook, mate on c7. Of course, in here he has to calculate queen takes, and if pawn takes, then check followed by king takes. And if king takes, then at least this rook comes in with check. Very dangerous. He could take with the queen, and in that case black has to take the rook, and this is totally unclear. Maybe white is still winning with rook takes a7, threatening this check here. Rook d8, rook a8. But this would be totally unclear. Anyway, the approach has been different. Obviously, rook b1 is a solid move, and now queen takes a2. So, a pair of pawns have been exchanged, but obviously black's king is much more weakened now, so white has many more chances to convert his material advantage. So I think that McShane was so concentrated in looking for attacking moves on the king side, he just missed rook takes b7, which actually leads me to believe that c5 was also bad, because I think I could also go for rook takes b7 here with the same idea. King takes, bishop a6 check, and discovering the queen. So, a very nice tactic. f6 has been played, g6 and queen h3. Now the king really doesn't have anywhere to hide, and yeah, he has to block with the king, with the rook. And now this looks very bad. Actually, it seems that white is attacking now. I'm seeing moves such as rook d1 with the idea bishop a6. I'm seeing moves such as rook e1 with the idea rook e7. Yeah, actually, bishop e4 is a very sensible move. because he protects the queen a3, so there's no check. We attack here and we threaten rook d1. Many good moves. Gawain has played rook e1. That's being contested with rook d8. And now, as I said before, a move such as bishop e4 would be very solid. Threatening here, winning the game. The king and the rook are pinned. There are no checks because the queen protects. Bishop e4 would be a winning move. But he's gone another route. He's gone rook e4, which, okay, what's he trying to do here? Hide his king on d2 in case of queen a3. That's understandable. And against c5, where's that rook heading? He wants to go maybe to here. Obviously, he would like to go to a4, but that's not possible. And then there's this mate in b7 with the queen. How can we organize that? Maybe rook e7 with the idea queen f3. That looks good. Lucas played bishop b5. Okay. Having advanced that pawn, the rook is now pinned. Only move c6. Played. This is beginning to look very, very suspicious. But of course, if he takes here, no, this is just lost. Queen a3 is not possible. And he goes here, we take, and this is just an extra rook. Probably just rook e7 now. It's the easiest way to win the game. There's no check here. Yep, this is lost. So I'm thinking that the game might easily finish here after bishop takes c6. He's played king c7, but that's more or less resignable. Unless there's something I'm missing, which I don't think so. Yeah, take on d7, and then rook e7 is just an easy win. But, so how's this gone? Take. Ah, okay, so simplify with rook b7. Okay, that's good. And now 1-0 with rook a4. Fantastic. Very good game by Jones. But probably a huge blunder by Luc Machane, playing that move, allowing f5. I think the long castle was the bad move. I think he blundered f5. I don't think it was any sort of sacrifice. So, Gawain Jones gets the first point in the mini-match final. And now Luc will play with white. And he's in need of a win to tie the match and go to the Armageddon final. If the game is a draw or Gawain wins with black, the title is for Gawain. We'll see you soon. 5 minutes, and we'll see the next game of the match. Hi, and welcome back to the final rounds, the final game, the final minutes of the British, the 104th British of 2017. So the first game of the playoff has been won by Gawain Jones after it seems that Luc Machane blundered a piece at some point in the middle game. And that means that in this game, a draw will automatically give the title to Gawain Jones, who will be now playing with the black pieces against, as we said before, Luc Machane. The game is about to start, hasn't started yet, and bearing in mind that Machane has to play for a win, I think he will try for a more aggressive approach than in previous games in this same tournament. So, for instance, if Gawain goes for a Spanish, which is what I think he'll do, I sense that Luc might try something a bit more aggressive than the Spanish or the slow Italian that he's used in other games during the tournament. Maybe a maybe a King's Gambit. Who knows? We'll see soon. Obviously, Gawain could try and play his Dragon Sicilian, but I think that when he just needs a draw, I don't think that type of opening would be the correct one in his position. But who knows? And who am I to judge? So let's wait for the moves to come in. And yeah, it can't be more exciting than this. A 4-way tie after 9 rounds, 2 semi-final games, 2 winners progress to the final, and now 2 10 minutes with 5-second increment games. And if Luke McShane is able to win this game, we're going to go to the Armageddon, which means just one last 5-minute game where one of the two players has an extra minute but is forced to win. And that will be interesting to see who wins the draw, the lot, and who chooses to play. Okay, so the moves are in, and it's e4, e5, and we're actually awaiting for the moves. Okay, trying to get the moves here. The game has started, but I'm not receiving the moves as to yet. Okay, here they are. And we have a Spanish on the board. So, let me pick up the broadcast. Now, this was played in the game between McShane and Gawain in the normal game they played, which ended in a draw in 12 or 13 moves. So, I have to suspect that both players considered their options and might have found an improvement, specifically on the white side, because in the game I think h6 was played in the regular game, and white eventually captured pawns on e5, and the game was a draw in 3 or 4 more moves. That's not good for McShane in this match situation. He'll have to try and find something a bit more aggressive. Now Gawain is content with repeating the moves he played in the match, and I think this is the improvement, which is h3. I seem to remember that he played d takes e5 in his regular match. Maybe he was unsure of the complications after h3, and I'm sure Lucas considered this variation after the game, maybe going over the game with his analysis or with his computer. So it's now Black's turn. It's always important to remember that a draw gives Gawain the title, so he has to avoid playing, obviously, too passive, but when he can choose between a sharp continuation or a more solid continuation, he'll generally prefer the solid continuation. Rook fe1 is the move that has been played by Luke, just overprotecting the e4 pawn, and maybe considering at some point the typical transfer of the knight via d2 via f1 to go to g3, where it can already put its eyes on the king on g8. Now this is an Arcalanche variation. So generally in these positions the b6 bishop would be situated on f8, and there Black could play g6 and bishop g7. Of course, having the bishop on the other side of the board does give Black more tension and attack on the d4 pawn. But the downside of that is that if White is able to drum up an attack on the king's side, Black may miss his bishop at some moments during the game. So those are basically the strategies in this type of position. Of course, with the rook on e8 and the knight on f6, knight f1 is more or less impossible, because after pawn takes pawn, so let's make a non-move here. For instance, queen c8, knight f1, pawn takes pawn would highlight the insufficient defense of the pawn on e4. So that has to be considered. But the thing is, which move could Black play in this position? Well, it's funnily enough, he has played queen c8. So I said a non-move, and he's just played that non-move. Or there's been a mistake in my notes. I'll try and check this now. But yeah, effectively, queen c8 has been played, which is actually quite funny, because that is the non-move we were waiting for. No? So obviously knight f1 can't be played. he may be sort of insinuating the possibility of a sacrifice on h3, but it could be a bit far-fetched, that sacrifice. But yeah, who knows? So obviously king h2 could be a way to defend, and if he's really worried about that sacrifice. So we're still in the position after queen c8. Yep, no moves have been played. Now it's white's turn to consider his options. Pawn takes pawn would release the tension. I don't think that's a good move. Also, queen c8 has the advantage of preventing any rook a6 ideas because it controls that square. So, yeah, obviously king h2 is a possibility here. A real possibility. The knight hasn't been played to f1. That's my analysis. I'm going to take that back. And king h2 would be a serious possibility because it would definitely prevent the sacrifice on h3. And at some point, it could be useful to get the king out of this diagonal. But basically, it would be to prevent the sacrifice. We also need a useful move here. And the other idea would be to try and overprotect the pawn on e4 to try and finish this maneuver. But for that, we need something more to protect this pawn, and we can't really get anything else protecting the pawn because bishop c2 protects it, but the queen is in front of the bishop, so we can't really prevent pawn takes pawn and knight takes e4. So what other moves could we have here? Obviously d5 is a possibility, but generally speaking this allows black to transfer the knight to g6 and blocks off this bishop on the attack on the f7 square, so that really isn't a move that white would like to do. He's played rook c1, apparently. I'm going to confirm that. But yeah, rook ac1 has been the move. That's, in principle, the useful move that white has found. Okay, two ideas here. One, if there is exchange of pawns, the rook occupies the open file. That's good. And two, in some positions after d5, he can go c4 and the rook is in a good position. But black has already answered with knight a5. Now he's hitting the bishop on b3. That bishop really can't be exchanged. So I'm thinking bishop a2 or bishop c2. I don't think bishop c2 is the correct move, so it must be bishop a2. Yep, he's just played bishop a2. That's an obvious move. And, of course, if you put the knight on the side of the board, then there's not much pressure on d4. So white can relax regarding the pressure on d4. Black has just played c5. It's a very enterprising move. I don't think he's threatening pawn takes pawn. White would capture back and the rook would hit the queen. But he may be threatening c4, blocking off this bishop for a good part of the game. So now white has an interesting decision. Obviously d5 can't be played because it would be totally illogical to shut in the bishop. So one option is to exchange pawns here and try and do something with the queen in the open file. But black's coordination seems quite reasonable, so there's really nothing here. But it's an option. Maybe knight f1, c4, queen c2. We have to keep protecting this pawn. And now we can go for knight g3 and maybe at some moment knight f5. This could be an option. I think knight f1 is still bad because of e takes d pawn and knight takes e4. Yep, this doesn't look good. So we'll go back. Yeah, I'm thinking that white has to release the tension. I'm struggling to find other good moves. Maybe knight h4, but it doesn't seem to be such a good move. What I really like to do is to try and attack the pawn on f7, but I have no other pieces. So that's really a problem for me. Yeah, I have the feeling that white may exchange pawns on e5 and eliminate the tension. But of course, he has to try and win this game. So it's tricky to exchange pawns. I'm going to check on the time situation. So Luke has 5 minutes, just under 6 minutes against 8 minutes for for Gawain Jones, which is actually quite good. So yeah, things are looking good for Gawain in this matchup. I don't think he's necessarily better, by no means. But the thing is, it's hard for me to find an active plan for White to try and play for the win. Maybe he could consider putting the rook on d1 and then consider opening up the game. For instance, pawn takes pawn, and rook d1. This could be an option because the rook is no longer valid on c1. And maybe if c4, just drop back to c2 and try and finish off with this maneuver. But I'm thinking that here, bishop c6 would be a good move because by putting pressure on this pawn, he will not allow the knight to go to f1. Okay, we can exchange here and play knight f1, maybe queen b7, knight g3, and this is okay for White. But look at this bishop on a2, totally out of play. Okay, Max Shane's gone a different route. He's played queen b1. So he protects the bishop, he anticipates the move c4, and he keeps the eye on the pawn on e4. So at some point he can play pawn takes pawn and knight f1. So it's just a sort of prophylactic move. It doesn't change the structure and gets his queen out of the way. This is what we call a grandmaster move. It's a sort of move that someone of my strength would not normally think of. But look at what Gawain Jones has just done. He's gone c4. And now this highlights the problems of the bishop and the queen. Totally out of play. So what to do now? b3. I'm not really liking this move because there are going to be tactical problems on the file. d5 is an option. But again, we've closed off this. And after the exchange of bishops, I can even think that the knight could come to c5 with very, very good play. Look at the amount of squares that knight would control on c5. Well, as you can see, in general, I'm not liking White's position. I don't like this variation of White. I've never played it, and it's just a variation I don't like playing. Okay, so he's gone b3. So he wants to activate these pieces, even at the risk of falling into some sort of pin on the b file. Well, that is enterprising, and it's obviously that's the correct strategy with his match situation where he needs to win, but it's risky. So 6 minutes against 4, and Jones very quickly has opted to play queen a6, just piling up the pressure on the a2 bishop, and solidly protecting the c4 pawn, and also this rook could eventually come to c8. So now what to do? Of course, b4. I mean, the position just closes. And black can't be worse here because he even controls the file. So this wouldn't be spectacularly good. So Max Shane opens the bishop with b takes c4. Now black recaptures, b takes c4. Threatening, by the way, bishop takes d4. And now White really needs to get his queen out of the way. I'm thinking queen c2, but we'll wait for the move. Yeah, already queen c2 has been played. Black 6 minutes, White 4. I have to remember here that the increment is only 5 seconds, so you hardly get any time to play after you've made your move. But it's enough to be able to convert a winning ending, for instance. Whereas 2 seconds sometimes is not enough for that type of idea. Okay, now after queen c2, the queen is outside the scope of the rook. It still protects the pawn on e4. So maybe rook a1 will be the next move. So I do think that McShane has organized this position very well. Maybe it's time to play something like queen b7, continuing the pressure on the e4 pawn. But Gawain has gone with pawn takes pawn. Yeah, this is a very concrete decision because now he'll try to attack this pawn. In general, when this type of pawn tension in the center, both players want the other player to capture. So black wants white to capture on e5, and white wants black to capture on d4. So in general, to play for a win, Luke will be happy with this decision as long as he doesn't drop a pawn. So let's say he captures back. He's captured back with the knight. So maybe there was a concrete problem with capturing the pawn. Maybe bishop a5, pinning the knight on d2 against the rook on d1 and threatening knight takes pawn. This maybe was the problem. Okay, so he's captured back with the knight. Well, more exactly, he's captured back with the pawn. And there's been an exchange of bishops. Yeah, he's captured back with the bishop. And after bishop takes bishop, knight takes bishops. Okay, so he prefers to have certain piece play instead of the pawn center. Now d6 is a bit weak, certainly more weak than f3, but black is a bit more active on the king side. But structurally, I'm starting to like white's position. This knight on d4 is certainly very powerful and probably better than the bishop on d7. So this pawn transformation, actually, I'm starting to think that it's possibly even better for white. So maybe e takes d4 is a move that Gawain shouldn't have played. He's gone queen c8. In any case, we have to remember that with games of 10 minutes, piece play activity is very important because when there's less time, that could obviously play a factor. So knight f1 has been played. The knight has gone to f1, heading to the square g3 or even maybe e3, probably g3. I think that the queen will go to c5. I think that's quite a stable square for the queen. And now the time situation is starting to become important. Both players are on just under 4 minutes. So everything is to be played for here. But of course, we still must remember that a draw will give the title to Gawain playing with black. He's just played queen b7. And white has played knight g3. The queen on b7 pressures the pawn on e4. And knight g3 just protect that pawn. And now it'll be interesting to see if black will make the decision to play g6, preparing to improve his king's position and also preventing any knight jump to f5 or to h5, specifically to f5 in this position. This rook will obviously be looking to go to d1 or maybe to b1. So queen b2, trying to exchange queens, has been played. But as we know, white has to play for a win and maintains the queen and keeping an eye on the weakness on d6. Black has played rook a8, heading to the 7th rank, very active. I think that's a good decision. And white has played queen f3. Also a good decision, keeping control of the e4 square, protecting f2 and also c3, so very efficient, but also eyeing the black king. As you can see, white is gradually increasing the pressure on the king. He has some ideas of entering the 7th file. He has some ideas of playing knight f5 and queen g3. And actually, I'm beginning to like white's position here. I'm starting to see some concrete threats, and that's very good for white. And also, if the times are correct, McShane has nearly 4 minutes, whereas Gawain is already under 2 minutes. So, yeah, this is starting to look good for white. And he's played queen d2. So this sort of stays in the middle of everything, still thinking of playing rook a2, and at some point can fall back to g5 if necessary. So this looks like a decent move. Queen d3 is also a possibility. And I'm wondering if white is going to play rook d1, attacking the queen. He's just played rook d1. Now I have to think that the queen was dropping back to g5. But now I'd really like to attack this pawn here. So I'm thinking maybe knight f5. Something like this, with a direct attack on that pawn. This looks ugly, very ugly for black. Okay, maybe he has d5. Maybe, with the threat of the pin. But then maybe e5. Okay, but this hasn't happened because white, instead of going back to g5, he's returned to b2. And I think he understands that he must keep the pressure on the 7th rank and maintain an attack on here. He also has the possibility of dropping back to b8 if the attack on d6 becomes strong. So, knight f5 been played. Knight takes, knight takes. This pawn is obviously going to fall, but black counterattacks the c3 pawn with rook a3. Now, both players playing very fast. We're getting to a really, really important moment in the game. Now knight f5 is playing. Queen g3 has been played. Obviously with the concrete intention of mating the black king. And it'll be interesting to see how black decides to defend against that threat. Because there are not many ways. Knight h5 I think is possible. But in that case white can just play queen g4 attacking the knight, which actually has been played. And now it seems to me that unless there's something I'm missing, g6 is practically the only move. Rook a2, counterattack. Okay, so if he captures here, obviously it's mate in 2. I'll develop this variation for you all. Check and mate. But obviously this is not going to happen. And when white has played rook f, went to protect, queen e2. So very active defense here by Gawain. So he's threatening to exchange queens. And f3 is not valid because the knight will be on praise because of the mate on g2. Very enterprising, very well played. I like. I'm learning all sorts of defensive ideas in this position. So the pawn has been captured on d6, and immediately black plays rook e6 to get out of the attack of the rook, but also maybe to swing the rook to g6 at some point. But now white has won a pawn. Clocks are standing 2 minutes for white against 1 minute for black. Oh, I wonder if it's a good moment to exchange queens and maybe capture this pawn here. But no, knight f5 has been played. The knight returns to f5, keeps up the pressure. And black has played knight f4. The queens have been exchanged on g4. And now the e-pawn is being under attack. So this is obviously a game with two results. I can only see white winning this endgame because he's an extra pawn. But I also see there's not much material, so the draw is always possible. So white has given the pawn on e4 to get his rook to the 7th rank, and will presumably capture the pawn on e2. Black has checked on e2, and I think he's going to try and capture the pawn on g4, which is just done. So the moves are flying by now. This is going very fast. Both players under a minute and a half. Rook d1 with the idea rook to d7. And as you can see, white has an extra pawn and it's pressing. So good for Luke. I'm seeing maybe knight f4 d3 could be an option. That's something black has to calculate now. Knight f4 would attack the pawn on g2. And in the case of g3, then knight d3 blocks the rook. And also is attacking the pawn on f2. So knight f4 does seem to be the move. But also, if this knight moves, there's a mate on h4. Because the king can't move to g1 or g3. So there may be moves such as king h8 here. But no, he's playing knight f4. Very sensible. Attacks here, attacks here, attacks here. And anything can happen. It does seem to me that, wow, has he dropped the rook? What's happening here? Has he dropped the rook? No, this is not possible. Wow. So, knight f4, knight e3, rook takes f2. And what about the rook? Okay, so he's going to try and defend this ending. Very interesting. Very interesting. Because he's got 2 pawns and the knight for the rook. Rook g4. And now what? Check and check. I wonder if he's seen this tactical trick. Rook d4 straight away. Wow. So the knight is pinned and the rook is under attack. Okay, but we can arrive at the same position in principle. Or can't we? No, we can't. So he's gone knight to d3. I'm not understanding any of these moves. This is just far beyond me. What about the rook here? What has black got here? Oh, he's got a double attack on e5, but then rook g7. I'm not understanding these moves. Why can't he just capture the rook? Oh, because the other rook is attacked here. Oh, and if rook takes rook, knight takes rook. Wow, defending everything. But then he goes knight takes. No, there's something missing that I'm not understanding here. What has happened here? Knight d3, rook takes rook. Okay, so I understand that if rook takes rook, then probably black would exchange first rooks on d4. So he took on g4, took on f7, took on c4. And it's knight, rook and 2 pawns against knight, rook and 2 pawns. Well, Gawain has defended extraordinarily well. Very well here. Very well. It was very easy to lose this position. And it's very low on time. He's found some incredible tactics. Okay, so now it's 30 seconds against 10. They're essentially only playing with the increment. So we'll try and just follow the moves as well as we can. g4 protects the knight. White wants to play rook g7, attack the g7 pawn. Both players are playing with their increment now. It does seem to me unlikely that Gawain would lose this position after getting through all those complications, but when both players are under 10 seconds, you never know. Let's update again. Rooks have left the board. Now, they say that the knight endings is like the pawn endings. If the pawn endings is a draw, the knight endings is a draw as well. And I'm thinking that after g6 and h5, when the last pawn is being exchanged, this will end in a draw. And if that happens, we know that this is a huge result for Gawain. He's exchanged the last pawn, and this is a lock. This is a draw because even if he loses this pawn, he'll just sack the knight for the pawn, and this is a draw. So, I'm sorry to say that Luke, although he's played extremely well the tournament, this game, due to this magnificent, wonderful defense by Gawain in those moments where the 2 rooks were being attacked, is going to save a draw, and the game has finished in a draw. So, the new British champion, Gawain Jones, I think it's the second time he's won at least, and Luke Machane falls short another time. he'll have to wait for a future moment to be able to win this title, which I'm sure he'll achieve at some point. And Gawain's great nerves have allowed him to win the first game and defend a tricky position, combining defense with counter-attack, and clinch the title with this draw in the last game. And of course, from our parts, we'd like to say thank you for all of you for having assisted during these 9 days to the commentary. I've been here joined by fantastic commentators such as Ilya Tharagatsky. Thanks to Ilya. Thanks to Daniel. 5 days with Daniel here, with Daniel Fernandez. Excellent commentator and giving really in-depth analysis. And with Stephen Gordon these last 2 days. And I've actually learned a lot, both as a commentator and also as a chess player. So I'm really happy to have been able to give you my analysis. And Macaulay, do you want to come in and say farewell to the spectators till the next day? I'm going to get Macaulay in. And he's the man behind the machines. And
now you're in your close-up, so...
Okay, so come on in, Macaulay.
You're in your close-up here, so I can't really get in. But thanks for watching. Singfield Cup starts in 45 minutes.
And we're going to be doing that as well, so... No time to stop here. And see you all soon, and hopefully at some other moment we'll continue commentating for these websites and offering the analysis. And as always, organic commentators, no engines here, as much as we can. And thanks a lot, especially for all of you. I just don't want to mention names because there's been so many of you, but every day in the chat offering your own opinions, pushing us to get good commentary in, and staying with us even after our more than 10 minutes breaks. And it's basically because of you lot out there that allow us to commentate here and have a good time with something that is our passion. I'm sure it's also your passion, which is chess. So, thanks a lot. See you all soon. Bye-bye.